I never thought a single piece of paper could make my blood boil like it did that morning. I was sipping my coffee, enjoying the sunrise over my small farm when the letter arrived. Bright, official-looking, and stamped with the HOA seal. You are in violation of community regulations. You have 10 days to remove all livestock and cease farming activities, or face fines. My heart sank, then skipped a beat. 10 days? My cows, my chickens, my vegetable beds, they were my life, my livelihood and my freedom. And some HOA bureaucrat wanted to take that away? I stared at the letter like it had grown fangs. My neighbors had warned me about the HOA. They were strict, yes, but I never imagined they would come after a bona fide farm. I own the land, every inch of it. And yet here was a document, threatening to criminalize the very work that kept me awake at night and fed my family. I felt the familiar rush of indignation that comes from being cornered by someone who has no real authority over you. The thing about HOAs is that they often operate in a gray area, rules that sound reasonable until they're weaponized against someone who dares to live differently. I had followed every rule I could find, paid my dues, and kept my property pristine. But apparently, a few cows grazing too close to the road and a vegetable patch that extended beyond some invisible line made me a criminal in their eyes. That morning, I knew something had to change. I walked the perimeter of my property, touching the fence posts I had installed with my own hands, feeling the earth beneath my boots. This was mine, not just on paper but in spirit, sweat, and blood. They could send letters, they could threaten fines, but the moment they stepped foot here without my permission, they'd be trespassing. I wasn't about to let a committee of self-appointed watchdogs dictate how I lived on land I had worked for years to build. I started drafting a plan. First, I would respond to the letter, not with apologies, not with excuses, but with facts. I knew my legal standing. The HOA had overstepped its authority. Then, I decided I would make it abundantly clear. My property, my rules. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. But it wouldn't be a battle fought with threats. It would be a battle they could not win. Because I understood my rights better than they understood their rules. That was the day the quiet farm life ended and the war with the HOA began. My chickens clucked obliviously, my cows grazed, and I made a silent vow. No one, not even the HOA, would take my land or my livelihood. I didn't have to wait long for the first confrontation. A few days after sending my response letter, I noticed a black SUV parked suspiciously near the entrance to my property. Two men in crisp HOA polos were walking along the perimeter, clipboards in hand, clearly measuring, noting, judging. My stomach tightened. I've faced tough customers and harsh winters, but nothing compares to the feeling of someone questioning your right to your own land. I stepped outside, letting my boots crunch over the gravel, and called out, "Can I help you?" The taller one cleared his throat, flipping through his papers. "We're here to ensure your property complies with HOA regulations. You're currently in violation and—" I cut him off, holding up the letter I had received. "I read your letter. I also read my property deed. I own this land, and I do not consent to inspections beyond what's legally allowed. Please leave." He shifted uncomfortably. I could see the tiny crack in their carefully rehearsed authority. "Sir, we have a right." "No, you don't. Not here. Not today. Not ever unless I invite you," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. My cows watched from a distance, sensing my tension, and I felt a surge of defiance. This wasn't just about farming. It was about respect, autonomy, and knowing where I draw the line. The shorter one tried a different tactic, smirking like they were trained in intimidation. "You know fines can escalate quickly. We can—" "I know. And I also know that I will contest every single one in court if it comes to that," I said. "So let's save time. Pack up. Leave my property now." After a tense pause, they glanced at each other and muttered something under their breath before retreating to their SUV. I stood there until it disappeared down the road, feeling a mix of adrenaline and relief. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. My point had been made. This farm was not theirs to command. Later that day, I began documenting everything. The letters, the encounters, even the damage threats they implied. Every photo, every note, every moment became part of my armor. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. I knew that once the HOA smelled blood, they would push harder. And I needed to be ready. By sunset, the farm was calm again. The chickens pecked at the soil, the cows lazily grazed, and the horizon glowed golden. I realized something important. This fight wasn't just legal. It was personal. And if they thought they could bully me into submission, they were dead wrong. The following week, the HOA decided to escalate. Another letter arrived, this one thicker, brimming with legal jargon and threats of escalating fines. They weren't just stopping at warnings anymore. They wanted to make an example out of me. My initial anger flared, but I forced myself to calm down. This was no longer just about a dispute over cows or crops. It had turned into a test of wills. I spread the letter on my kitchen table, my mind racing. Every clause, every reference to community rules and penalties, I dissected carefully. A mistake here, a loophole there. This was my battlefield. I wasn't going to just respond emotionally. I needed a plan that would put me completely out of their reach. Step 1. Research. I spent hours reading property laws, HOA limitations, and previous cases where landowners had successfully challenged overreaching HOAs. Knowledge became my weapon. Every paragraph I read reminded me that the law favored the rightful owner of property. They could threaten, they could intimidate, but they couldn't override the fundamental rights I had as a landowner. Step 2. Documentation. I walked the entire property with my camera, recording every inch of land, every fence post, every grazing animal. I took timestamps, kept logs of all interactions, and even noted the growth of crops and livestock schedules. If this went to court, I would have an undeniable record of ownership, use, and care. Step 3. Community support. I reached out to neighbors who had quietly suffered under similar HOA rules but hadn't dared to resist. Some were hesitant at first, afraid of retaliation. But as I explained my approach, legal, methodical, and unyielding, they began to see the possibility of standing up themselves. A few even volunteered to back me if the HOA tried further intimidation tactics. By midweek, the atmosphere had shifted. The farm, which had always been a quiet sanctuary, now felt like a stronghold. Every plant, every cow, every patch of soil became a symbol of resistance. I began planning a response letter, not just defensive but assertive. One that would remind the HOA exactly who they were dealing with. One that would make it clear, my land, my rules, and no fine or threat could change that. And as I watched the sun dip behind the barns, painting the sky in hues of fire, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about crops or cows anymore. It was about proving that a single person, armed with knowledge and conviction, could stand up to a faceless bureaucracy and win. The next move would be critical. I had to act decisively, or risk losing more than just peace of mind. The day I delivered my final response to the HOA, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. My letter was concise, backed by law, property deeds, and thorough documentation. I didn't plead. I didn't apologize. I laid out the facts. The land was mine. My farming activities were legal, and any attempts to enforce fines or trespass would be met with legal action. It was firm, unyielding, and most importantly, unassailable. Within days, their first reaction was predictably dismissive. Another email, another passive-aggressive reminder of community standards. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. I responded immediately, referencing previous legal precedents and providing detailed evidence of my rights. I copied the local authorities and even reached out to a property lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. Suddenly, the tone of the correspondence shifted. What had been smug and threatening became cautious, almost conciliatory. Next came the surprise I hadn't anticipated. A few neighbors, inspired by my stand, began questioning the HOA's authority themselves. The momentum had shifted. They weren't just defending me. They were defending their own property rights. And that solidarity made the HOA visibly uneasy. I could almost feel the panic in their emails. The bureaucratic machine that once thrived on fear and compliance now stumbled under the weight of truth and collective resolve. Finally, after weeks of back and forth, the HOA sent a formal notice. They were retracting the fines and confirming my right to continue farming. Victory didn't feel like a headline or a trophy. It felt like the quiet satisfaction of justice upheld. I walked the farm that evening, past the cows grazing peacefully, past the flourishing vegetables, past the fences I had built with my own hands. Every inch of that land was a testament to resilience and rightful ownership. It wasn't just about me. This victory became a message. Bureaucracy has limits. Authority has boundaries, and knowledge paired with courage is unstoppable. Standing up for yourself doesn't always require confrontation in person. It requires preparation, clarity, and unwavering confidence in your rights. As the sun set, painting the sky over the barns in fiery orange and deep purple, I realized something profound. The farm had always been mine, but the fight had transformed it. Every crop, every cow, every fence post was no longer just part of a livelihood. It was a symbol of freedom, of standing tall in the face of overreach. I had won, not through anger or revenge, but through patience, research, and steadfast determination. And anyone who doubts their ability to defend what's theirs should remember, knowledge is power, and courage is contagious. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more epic HOA showdown stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below, letting me know what you would do if someone tried to boss you around on your own property. And don't forget to like this video if you think standing up for your rights deserves a win.